In our dreams, we are filled with vivid visualizations, vivid experiences, and vivid sensorial perceptions directly related to archetypal experiences, archetypal people, and even archetypal motifs. So these come from Carl Jung's ideas, and Carl Jung expanded a lot in his writing and his work on dream analysis, on the archetypes that are present. And very often we focus on archetypes being a person and their role. In fact, I notice that when I'm teaching, I'm often talking about the different people and the roles. But I think it's important to recognize that archetypes can also come in a number of different areas as well. So in this short tutorial, I'm going to talk both about the roles, the archetypal roles that Jung identified, along with the motifs, the common challenges that we often dream about, and also with the archetypal events that people experience in life. So when you're dreaming, you may very well dream of birth related experiences, you giving birth, someone else giving birth, or even something giving birth, right? One thing giving a new life to something else. Now, this new life could be something could be something that is interpreted joyfully. It could also be interpreted scarily. It could really be interpreted in any different way. But birth is one of those archetypal events, and the reason why is it's a cultural universal. Every culture, every person in the world gives birth or has the capacity to give birth in one way or another. And we see this in nature. We see this in our solar system as a star explodes, birthing a new galaxy in a far and distant place. So, birth is a very important archetype event that we can dream about, that we can identify as an experience we're having. It may or may not look like a birth in a hospital of a human baby being born. It could come in any number of other different formats, but the interpretation around this, the meaning we ascribe to it is a birth, a huge transition from one thing really metamorphosizing into something else, right? The next generation. So this is a very important archetype. Another one, of course, is death. We might have dreams about our own mortality, the dreams about those who have preceded us in death. We might have dreams about other people who are at risk for death, and death is a common theme in many of the dreams we have. And this is a archetypal event we frequently see, and this can symbolize a number of different things. It could symbolize finality. It could symbolize destruction. It could symbolize bad things going away. It could symbolize loss. It could symbolize um, uh, uh, the need to carry the torch and the mantle then after the birth into the next generation. So death can, of course, have many different meanings. And so we're looking for the archetypal experiences and events in our dreams and what the meaning of these archetypal experiences is. Separation, Jung noted, from parents is again a cultural universal. This happens as as children become adults and as they marry and have their own families and those sorts of things. But we have unintentional separation from parents. We have premature separation from parents. We have unexpected separation from parents. And if you've studied anything on attachment and attachment disorders, if you've studied anything really on personality development, what we see is that interruptions in the expected experiences of attachment to parents, parent figures, caregivers, communities can often have very traumatic results for people. This can become, for many people, an archetype that becomes a recurring type of dream that can even be distressing to people. And of course, it could, the opposite, be an archetypal event because I've now separated from my parents. I've come into my own. I've transitioned into maturity, adulthood, self responsibility. And there could be good things associated with that. So none of these are really identified as bad archetypes or good archetypes, but each person is going to find and discover their own meaning. Then, of course, initiation. Initiation, if you're a member of any club, there's probably some type of initiation. I remember when I was a kid and I was a Boy Scout, We would get to a new rank, and there was a ceremony for our new rank. This is an initiation. I was a member of, when I was a Boy Scout, the Order of the Arrow. They had what was called the tapping out ceremony. So in our culture, we all have another cultural universal, initiation rites, rites of passage. And these are common archetypes that people have in their dreams. They're experiencing an initiation from one thing into a new thing. And again, the attachment of meaning to it, good or bad, or simply different, is going to differ on the type of dream that we're having. But this is an archetypal event that I think is significant, that when we dream these, we should note that there was an initiation experience of some type. Then we can determine what that means for us. Marriage is another one of these archetypal events where one person ideally joins with another person to become one. One of my favorite Chinese movies was a movie called Point Zero Five. That was the title of the movie. And I watched the movie, and it was a romance movie. And it was about two broken people. They were each viewed themselves as a point zero 0.05, and together they created the sum total of one. And so we see that ideally this is the archetypal event where people cleave together, they leave their parents, we can combine these archetypal experiences, they become one. Sexual experiences sometimes can actually be the archetype of unification with a person, whether we actually marry them or not. All of these things are again, archetypal events. And then union of opposites. Put on your thinking hat here and think of Taoism, or what's sometimes referred to as Taoism, the yin, the yang, that opposites coexist with each other. Carl Jung was a believer that there is a union of opposites, that there is really in all of us a shadow self. The best example of this from literature, of course, is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the good and the bad coexisting together. And we see this archetypal event of union of opposites where we have a discovery of the shadow self, where we allow the shadow self into our daytime world, where we can actually move into acceptance from a therapeutic perspective, no longer having to change those things that are bad about me, but instead focusing on the things that are right with me. You know, I used to spend a lot of time trying to fix what was wrong in my broken life. You can watch my TED Talk. I came from a dysfunctional family. I have, of course, decades now of sobriety and Alcoholics Anonymous. With things weren't necessarily easy, and I didn't have the greatest coping strategies. I spent a lot of time trying to fix myself, and now I've learned union of the opposites, that that it's okay for me to not be okay. And that has allowed the okay side of me to be okay. And that can be a transformational process for so many people. This is the idea in acceptance and commitment therapy. Acceptance doesn't mean I like something, I endorse something, I'm glad it happens, I hope it happens to other people. No, it simply means I acknowledge its presence in my life. I look at it. I go on from here. So Carl Jung discussed this as an archetypal event, the union of opposites, and you will probably dream about this in the future, and you probably have in the past. Of course, when we look at archetypal figures, we have the mother, the father, the child, the devil, the god, the sage, the man sage, the wise old woman, the woman sage, the trickster, and the hero. And again, there are very few cultural universals, but these archetypes of roles are often present across cultures. The first time I went to China, I was taken to a Taoist temple in the mountains. And so I went to this temple, and although the temple was amazing, the reason that I traveled to the temple was because the sage, the wise man who sat at the end of the road, had heard about me, and he wanted to meet me. And so I was brought as a guest to meet with this important person, the sage. And I asked, how long has this person been sitting at the end of the road at the entrance to the temple? And the answer was for 40 years. But the most amazing thing is there was a wise old sage that sat there before he did. And when he goes, there'll be a new wise old sage. And according to the temple history, that's been going on at that temple for more than 1,000 years. So we see these roles as being important. They might manifest in, 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 in different cultures in different ways. Maybe in a Western culture, that sage is the professor. Maybe the sage is the oldest member of the family. But we're going to see these figures, and we might not necessarily dream about our mother or our father, or even a person who is a mother or father, but a person who's filling that role in the dream. And they're probably fulfilling that role to us. One of the things I noticed in my personal experiences, I grew up in a fatherless home. My father finally died as a result of his addiction when I was 16, whether it was by his own hand or by accident. We'll never know the answer to that. He was absent for the 10 years prior to that. He was drunk for the first 6 years of that. And so even though the father is something that I never experienced in my own personal life, I've had many dreams over the years where somebody has played a fatherly figure, or where I have played a fatherly figure. Now, I have kids, and my kids will actually tell you I'm a pretty good dad. And I always say I'm not good at a lot of things, but I'm a good dad, I'm a hard worker, and I'm actually a pretty good friend. So those are the three things that I do well. I had to learn how to be a father because I never had anybody who was an example of that. And I think that my dream experiences helped me to understand my own role as a father and what a father was all about. So these figures can be important to us. Motifs. Motifs are ways that we conceptualize experiences in dreams. It could be a deluge, a sense of overwhelm. It could be a deluge of rain. It could be a deluge of money. It could be a deluge of cold weather. It could be a deluge of emotions. But being overwhelmed, and a lot of people will report deluge related dreams. Then, of course, we have creation dreams, where something occurs, the Latin ex nihilo, out of nothing. And it's amazing how in our dreams we can have ex nihilo dreams. We can literally create out of nothing, back to Latin tabula rasa, that blank slate of the mind, a new idea. And I think that sometimes the creation motif, coupled with a birth archetype, coupled with a figure, maybe a sage type role, this is where we get things like the sewing machine that was invented in a dream, or the periodic table of elements that was created in a dream. And so creation motifs in dreams can incur powerful creativity. And of course, Jung also identified apocalypse, the the total destruction of everything, as one of those archetypes. And every faith, every religion has a story about how it's all going to end, right? The apocalypse of one type or another. And people are, of course, trying to avoid apocalypse. Whether it's political, economic, familial, behavioral, emotional, we're all apocalypse is on our minds. So it's not surprising that this is something that we dream about. So as you go through the third step of the heart process, the archetypes, the images, the symbols, expand your awareness not only to the archetypal roles, but to the events and the motifs as well.